Hey guys, welcome to another Game Time Discussions podcast. And my name's Emery Cuzzy, and then joined by Cameron Selby. Today we're going to talk about the NFC South, and we're going to go over some of the ups and downs of one of the lower divisions in football. Best team came out with a 9-8 record in the Tampa Bay Bucks, and they had 27 total wins between the four teams. So we definitely have some things to talk about, and hopefully we'll see some positive regression out of these teams rather than some of the negative regression that we have seen in the years past. So that's kind of what we're going to get going into. We're going to start with the Carolina Panthers today. Carolina, of course, missed the playoffs, 2-15 this year, on the coattails of a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young. Bryce Young, we can talk about if the right decision was made with the trade for Bryce Young originally, and just kind of talk about, if they would have stayed and they were the number one pick this year, they'd be getting Caleb Williams instead of Bryce Young, and they would have kept that draft capital. Just kind of want to hear your take on, that trade and how it's possibly going to set them up in the future, and how they can fix the issues that they're in right now.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, when you end up with the worst record in the league and you don't have that pick, it's never a good look in hindsight. But it seemed like they were in the 8 to 10 range for about 3 or 4 years in a row, and it seemed like that they felt like they had to make a change one way or the other, and so they kind of shocked us really, because Chicago wasn't necessarily looking to take a quarterback, but they were probably going to trade back last year, but we didn't expect Carolina to make the move to jump up all the way to 1, especially when we didn't think that there was a bona fide lock as the first pick.
Yeah.
I know Bryce Young was higher in a lot of people's eyes. I thought C.J. Stroud was right there, if not slightly above, just because of his intangibles and the size that he has as quarterback. Either way, whoever it was, giving up what you had to give to take that guy, on top of that, getting rid of your best weapon, who had been serviceable, and in the previous trade deadline, getting rid of Christian McCaffrey, who's an all-world talent at the running back position, it doesn't really set your quarterback up for a lot of success. And Bryce Young surely struggled. I mean, he was bottom of the league in passer rating, QBR, expected efficiency as a quarterback. He was not very talented this year.
Yeah.
But it also, you got to look at the piece around them, and that they downgraded on offense in a lot of areas. And so didn't really get a lot of improvement throughout the board. But I've never also seen a 2-15 team have one of the best defenses in terms of yards allowed. You don't really see that often. So,
well, I think that when you talk about their defense, like, they run the field a lot too. It wasn't just like they were, sometimes on good teams when you run the ball a lot, like, you kind of like hide yourself and you only play like 50 to 60 plays a game.
Right.
They were playing way more than that, and they still were fourth in the league in defensive yards per game, while their offense was 32nd, that last place in the league in yards per game. So I think that definitely is a telltale sign of, that they need to definitely keep those pieces on defense. But they're definitely going to have to make some moves offensively to help their quarterback out in Bryce Young, because they did jump so far in the draft and they don't have that draft capital. They're going to have to decide, probably to get rid of some of the premier guys on their defense to make space to get some guys on offense too.
Yeah, and obviously their high priority free agents, Brian Burns. That's somebody that you know very well, that you've loved, coming from Florida State. Been very solid as a defensive edge rusher. They actually turned down in 2022 at the deadline the same one that they got rid of Christian McCaffrey, a 2 first-round pick deal from the Rams to keep him. So it's very unlikely that you're going to see that kind of deal be declined, and then they're going to let him walk for nothing in free agency. So I'd expect him to be back either via extension or being franchise tagged. Hasn't really. We're at the very start of that process right now. As we speak, we've only seen T. Higgins officially get the franchise tag, but we've even seen rumors as of today that he could be on the move still. So just because you're franchise tag doesn't mean that you're going to be back. But I would expect him to be back because he's kind of the leader of that defense. And if there's going to be any way that they're going to compete moving forward, at least in the short term, is going to be keeping the score low and giving your young quarterback as many chances as you can. Because if all that you need to score 17, 18 points to win half your games, then that's something that will help, especially in this division, which is not one of the strongest in the league.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're going to kind of talk about is that, even if Carolina gets just a little bit better, say they, get 6-7 wins, they're probably not last in the division anymore. Just because of the teams that surround them, problems on other teams with cap issues and stuff like that. But they're going to have to do something to retain. They have six young free agents, I believe, on their defense. And so they're going to have to retain those guys because that is their core that is going to move forward. And they're going to have, the fourth overall defense, but that's who's making that happen. And they were lucky enough not to have to pay them the premium that they would have if they were, past that rookie contract. So now they're going to have to figure out how they're going to readjust some things, but they're going to need a receiver. They're going to need to go get a receiver. They're going to need to probably, I think Chuba Hubbard is probably a serviceable back, but they probably need somebody else to help them out.
The Miles Sanders addition was just not what they needed or was looking for, but even Deontay Foreman was a guy that was serviceable, and they tried to bring him in as a quote-unquote upgrade, and he really didn't really take the ball and run with it, so to speak. Right. No pun intended. But, really Brian Burns is the only very expensive hot commodity. Everybody else is a serviceable guy that will probably have a roster spot. Jeremy Chin, Shaquille Griffin, who's been with the Seahawks. Very nice players, but then also C.J. Henderson, who was a first-round bust. I don't see any of them taking contracts that's just like, oh, we can't afford that.
Of course.
But based on their assets, since they don't have their first pick, their first one's not till 33. Probably, I think the best way to get better in the short term is kind of going the route that Houston did in 2023, their offseason, where I know they had resources in the first round early draft, but they picked up a lot of defensive, just short-term answers that helped turn around that defense. They were bottom of the league, multiple years, and we'll get into that on another video about their turnaround that they did. Yeah. But they just went the 1-year rental route on these starters that probably had 1 or 2 years left as a the guy with their respective positions, and they made the most of it. And as a unit, kind of turned it around defensively. Carolina doesn't have that issue as much as they do offensively. So there's going to be guys that just will get the short end of the stick, right. And who knows if they're going to be ones that could capitalize off that, because who's to say that they can't bring in a couple of veteran receivers that really will help, because we saw Adam Thielen really making his mark he had a stretch in the middle of the season where he looked like Adam Thielen of old, and obviously if he's the only guy at this point in his career, he can't do it like he used to in Minnesota. So that's kind of the route that I see them going.
And I was going to say, you were talking about Adam Thielen, but they do have a young receiver in Mingo. They have, there are some bright spots on the team. It's not that they have, the third easiest schedule in football. Yeah. That has a lot to do with.
Yeah, that's going to be a common theme with this division, is that this entire division kind of got really benefited from their strength of schedule. And all of them are in the top 10 in terms of the easiest schedules. Carolina actually has the lowest amount in the NFL in terms of playoff games, and they only have 5 playoff games against teams that made the playoffs last season, and one of them is Tampa Bay in their division twice. So it's not like it's out of the realm of possibility that they could flirt with 7 or 8 wins just by schedule alone.
Yeah, of course. So I think the rebuild is on in Carolina. They're not as fortunate in the cap space realm as some other teams that are probably at the lower end of the league.
Right.
Being 14th, currently 14th ranked in the cap space is good, but when you have as many holes as they do, it's also something where, and especially if you're going to pay Brian Burns what he's worth, you're going to have some issues trying to find that cap space. So I think that that's something that we definitely going to watch them navigate and figure out as we get through the offseason, see what they do. I mean, 33rd is like you said, their first draft pick, so they're not
which
going
is
to
basically a first round pick.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they're going to be at the end of the world and not be able to improve their roster with their picks, because they're basically the first pick of every round in this draft. So they still have 4 picks in the top 150. Who knows if they can be aggressive or, trade back and get a little bit more capital to kind of build the overall core of their roster. But, it's a slow burn. I don't think that this is a 1-year turnaround like a Houston. But I will definitely anticipate improvement. I think they'll probably have one of the lowest win totals, but if it's around 4.5 or something like that, I would hammer the over with that, because I think that this could be a 6-win team. My only thing is just the coaching inexperience. First time OC, first time head coach in this realm. If they're going to be guys that can solve the issues, because since Ron Rivera was fired, they've been cycling through coaches, 6 coaches, the most in the NFL since 2019. They just haven't figured that out. And so I thought Frank Wright was a great hire, and the firing was pretty premature based on what you gave up. You can't expect a guy to come in with a young roster like they did, trade away the assets that they did, and then expect to instantly be a playoff team. And obviously 1-10 wasn't what they wanted when he was let go. But, bringing in David Canellis remains to be seen if that's the answer, and maybe he's another bridge. But that's one of the, I guess, negatives I would say about the team, is that I don't think that they have the right situation up top figured out. And it's kind of hard to bring your team around when you are still kind of cycling through.
Yeah, the trickle-down effect of it is going to definitely end up on the field. We'll see it on the field. But like we said, they have the easiest division in football. Tampa Bay being, the best team in the division from this last year. And lots of opportunity, luckily. But at the same time, we don't see them being a playoff team by any means. Like, that's not, like, we're definitely we definitely believe that they're going to get better, but not so much better that they're going to.
Yeah. I would still anticipate them being a bottom 6-7 team next year. But like I said, we see teams all the time overachieve on easier schedules by default. So we'll just kind of see where they go from here. But I think next offseason is the one that they'll truly make some noise and be a little bit more aggressive going forward. So, let's move over to the Atlanta Falcons. Finishing 7-10. Arthur Smith, again, he was one of the more frustrating coaches if you play fantasy football with how he kind of operates. But, they were a very good team that just kind of couldn't establish any kind of consistency this past year. But Raheem Morris is back. He's served about 5-6 years on the team on both sides of the ball. He's a well-liked guy, and I think he's a great locker room guy. It was one of my favorite hires this offseason in terms of the head coaches.
Yeah, I think that, you look at Atlanta, and there's some glaring things going on here. And I think the biggest one, of course, is quarterback. What are they going to do at quarterback? Desmond Ridder got his opportunity, was drafted, but not by this regime. And so they don't have to stand by him. They're going to be allowed to go find their guy, or what they think is serviceable for a team that's actually pretty good at football. I think this team, top to bottom, is probably to me, with a good quarterback and a solid style of coaching, they're the best team in the division to me. And so you look at, they have 6 starters on their offense that have been drafted or in the first round by Atlanta themselves. 3 on the O-line, including,
and they haven't really truly missed yet.
Right.
We'll see if Kyle Pitts obviously has had a couple down years, Drake London, but I feel like that's more of an effect based on the quarterback situation and how they were used compared to like them just actually not being good at football.
Right. I think with Kyle Pitts, style of offense that he was in didn't fit him at all. And so, because Arthur Smith came from Tennessee, where he gave the ball to Derrick Henry 25 times a game, I feel like. And so when he got to Atlanta, he did the same thing, with a two-headed monster more so. So I think that's another thing too, is just like see how they adjust to the pieces that they have, rather than just being stubborn and just saying we're going to do exactly what I've always done. And
Right.
I think that if that works, we're going to see the uptick with Bijan. We're going to see the uptick with Kyle Pitts. We're going to see the uptick with Drake London.
Absolutely.
And they'll be viable options in fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, it still sticks to me where I remember watching a goal line situation where it was first and goal. They went for it on all 4 downs, and they went running back, handoff up the middle to Tyler Algier, tight end around to Jonnu Smith, tight end screen to Jonnu Smith, run up the middle on 4th and goal at the 3 to Tyler Algier. And the last 3 years, top 10 picks.
Didn't touch the ball.
Yeah. And yeah, it's
frustrating.
It's frustrating. Yeah. And it's not even just a fantasy perspective, but it's just like, use your best players to win football games.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you get too cute with the players that haven't gotten you there, that's when you don't really have a great recipe for success to establish any kind of.
Right. And they have something that we normally try to point out is like when PFF has Chris Lindstrom as the number 1 guard this last year, PFF graded. He's been
second
great.
Straight season.
For the phenomenal. Second. Yeah, been great. And then they have, other guys that have been good on their line. So more so than just like they've done, like you said, they've hit on their picks. Now they just need to give them the opportunities that they deserve. And then, similarly on defense, they hit with AJ Terrell. He's been great. So yeah, I don't think that, the top end of Atlanta, where the GMs and the top front office, where they're, getting most of the scouting and the picks for the draft, like they've done great. So if you're an Atlanta fan, that's always something that you can look forward to, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And just coupling, we say that they have so many good offensive pieces, but I mean, they brought over Jesse Bates, who thrived in his first year. He was also the top at his position for all safeties, and he's been a Pro Bowl safety for a long time. And David Onyemata really stepped up this year, as well as they have had Grady Jarrett, who's been very good. He dealt with some injuries, but he'll be back, and so that's already 5 guys that is a great core for your defense. But on the edge, they've kind of, if they ever really truly missed over the last few years in the draft, it was them trying to hit on the edge. And they didn't really establish that. They brought in Bud Dupree, who's been a journeyman edge rusher, very serviceable free agent. If they bring him back, cool. But he's not really a game changer that they've probably been seeking.
Right.
At the 8th pick that they have this year, they've kind of been, in my eyes, a little bit of a wild card, because a lot of people want to place them with a skill guy again. I don't think that that's the way to go. I think probably they're in a good spot to pick the best defender on their board. I think they could use a great second corner to complement AJ Terrell if they want to use the first pick on a pass rusher. I think both of them, I think, are a slight reach, but based on the need that they have, I think that would go a long way establishing, and continuing to develop the core that they already have.
Yeah, I guess my biggest question, because we've had our mock draft, we put it out, our first one, and we talked about the edge class versus the receiver class, and I know you don't think that they'll go receiver, but it might be a talent thing also, because their difference in talent might be, well, Dallas Turner sits here, and Dallas Turner is third on our board, and he's probably the best fit for them. But you could then go get the number 3 wide receiver, who could be a number 1 wide receiver in a lot of different drafts. So that's kind of the thing.
And just because I think the first pick, that's probably not the way to go. It doesn't mean that they don't need to upgrade their wide receiver 2, 3, 4. I mean, they've just kind of been cycling in, veterans that are hanging on the league. I mean, Kadero Hodge, Matt Collins, and Van Jefferson are all free agents this offseason. So I wouldn't blame them for none of them being back. And so with that being said, you only have Drake London. And you need to bring in a speedster that could probably be the gadget guy, because Cordell Patterson, also aging and a free agent as well. So obviously, I think expect a heavy workload for the trio of guys that they have, but you still need, the fourth and fifth options to continue to move the chains and have the depth throughout the offseason. I'm sorry, throughout the season, in case there's any injuries, because
Yeah, of course.
all of them have kind of dealt with injuries in some retrospect over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I think that, like we talked about, like need is edge, need is corner, but talent, it might not be at that position there, so they might go somewhere else or move back. They could easily move back. Say they lock down possibilities at quarterback, of course, is like Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, Russ, whoever they decide is the best option for them if they go that way in free agency and during the offseason. If they do that, then they don't need quarterback, and someone might decide JJ McCarthy might be the guy, and they move back to the Raiders or the Broncos or wherever, and then they can say, okay, now our board makes way more sense talent wise at this pick rather than taking it 8.
Right, and the trio of veteran quarterbacks you mentioned, all of them could provide any kind of improvement instantly, but it just kind of depends on the direction you want to go. But they all have their positive outlooks. I mean, Kirk Cousins is the best of the bunch as of the moment, but at the same time, he's coming off an Achilles injury, so there's risk there. But also, you're going to be in the short term game with him if you did bring him in hypothetically, and so bringing in a young guy, whether it be in this class or next class or the year after, that would be kind of ideal in that situation. With Russ, him being released, there's reports that he's willing to play under the league minimum because of the guaranteed money he's going to receive from Denver. And because of the cap and how it is, having a quarterback on the minimum would be absolutely huge. Look at what the 49ers have been able to do the last couple of years, keeping the guys and keeping on adding talent around them. And it seems like they're bending the cap, but no, they just aren't spending a quarterback, so they could spend everywhere else.
Yeah.
And so a young team that just doesn't really have any big contracts, adding a quarterback for league minimum, yeah, they only have $33 million in cap space. That's in the middle of the pack, but all of a sudden, all your needs are really filled. So you can be aggressive and get the best corner in the free agency, your best lineman to already add to your top 4 lines. So those are the kind of moves that I think are really going to put them over the top if they used him. And then, of course, if you went the Justin Fields route, he's 24. He's younger than some of the quarterbacks in this class. So he's the option that you could have for the future. Obviously, you'd have to pay him in the short term, but I mean, you have the age of the 10 years that could go a long way to establish kind of somewhat a dominance that they had over this division when Matt Ryan was in his prime, and they were consistently winning. In the era which Drew Brees kind of had some down years with their defenses and stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like everything stems at quarterback, and that's where it's all going to start. And they're all different, like we said. Like Kirk Cousins is a pocket passer. You got Justin Fields, who moves a lot, and then you got Russ, who's kind of in the middle. So it's just pick your poison, pick the best option, pick the best money, also, if possible. And I think that they have a couple needs, but really they're right there. They were 17th offensively, even with a weird offense that they ran. That's pretty good. And then they were 11th defensively, which is really good, you know. So I think that they have the best up.
The biggest thing is they're not really paying anybody at the moment. Yeah. So you look at and they have the easiest strength of schedule tied with New Orleans. The difference is with New Orleans, they're kind of aging out with all their guys. And Atlanta is just finally coming into their own with their young guys because everybody's under 27. And on top of that, they have cap space. New Orleans doesn't, and they have to it seems like they're coming down, whereas Atlanta's coming up. So even though New Orleans has been hovering around 500 and Atlanta's been trying to catch them, I feel like this is the year where they're going to easily leap them. But we'll get to New Orleans in a moment. Yeah. But that's just kind of the optimism I see with them. But I would very much confidently say that they're probably the team to beat going into this year. I think it's really easy to determine that based on New Orleans and Tampa Bay and what they have to do to meet their cap needs and the guys that they could be losing compared to Atlanta, who is only going to add guys to their already talented roster.
Right, of course. Well, let's just jump to New Orleans. I think that there's actually probably a little bit more to talk about with the issues that they have in the cap, like you were saying, and then also, they bring Derek Carr in from the Raiders, and he has not done what they needed him to do to get them a little bit over the hump and get him into the playoffs. They just are dealing with the giant cap hit, of course, the age. We can talk about Michael Thomas and his injuries. We can talk about, Levante David was great. And so he's even older, but he's old for his positional, but he's been great, luckily. But Cam Jordan, he's up there. Tyrann Mathieu, he's up there. Things like that. We just, they're going to have to figure out how to reload very soon.
I mean, they came into this off season over $80 million over the cap. Like this, they were robbing Peter to pay Paul to finish or maximize Drew Brees last year's, and all of that cans were kicked down the road, and this is where it starts. And so they've cut that in half, but they are still basically bottom of the league in cap, and they've got to clear at least $30 million more before the new league year starts in a couple of weeks. So they're in trouble, and I think that they're going to be losing a lot of key pieces. People that we haven't even talked about that aren't free agents for them, because your left tackle's free agent. You've had, like you said, Michael Thomas, who just for whatever reason just cannot get off the injury bug. But guys like Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, all are guys that could be cut, traded, moved on from, just to get them down to zero. And that doesn't even talk about who they're going to replace those said names with. I'm not saying all of those are able, because some maybe can be restructured, but Ryan Ramczyk could be dealing with a career-threatening injury, and he's their biggest cap hit. I didn't even mention him because restructuring him doesn't really solve much this offseason, because they just extended him recently. So, Derek Carr, I know you said that he didn't do what you did to bring over the hump, but 25-8 was very solid with what he had to work with. He really just deep balls to Chris Olave and check downs. That's kind of what he was inherited it into. You couldn't really expect Michael Thomas to stay healthy throughout the year, because he hasn't shown that in 4 years. And you had some guys step up, like Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson on occasion, but there wasn't really any big over-the-top guys that just took advantage of the situation. Alvin Kamara was dealing with the suspension to start the year. Obviously, he came on strong, but he's getting up there in age too. It's a little strange. And then also you had the debacle that was the last game of the year, where they're calling kneel downs and they're faking kneel downs to score touchdowns when they're up 30. And those are the kinds of things where it's like you don't have the locker room as a coach, and that's why I was surprised when Dennis Allen returned. Obviously, Jameis Winston, all of it is gone as the backup, but that still really holds a lot of weight to me. Obviously, if the offenders that were a part of that are gone, so be it. But you still have to deal with that, and it's a real tough situation. I wonder if they just kind of brought him back to kind of weather the storm, the shit storm that they're about to deal with, because sure. It's hard to see, even having tied for the easiest schedule, them having or building off of their 9-8 year, where they came down the final week of the season to see if they would make the playoffs, because they tied with Buccaneers. They had the tiebreaker, didn't make the playoffs, but I don't really see them repeating that kind of scenario, despite maybe winning a couple games here or there where they probably don't deserve to or whatever. It just kind of feels like they've been in a purgatory of since that since Drew Brees, they've been around 500, too good to tank, but too bad to truly compete and take it over the top. And so I think it's almost time to essentially blow it up, and it's kind of hard to make it seem like this is the year for that, but it's the precipice.
Yeah, it's the beginning of that for sure. Well, like you were saying, and I meant Demario Davis. I said yeah, of course, but I was thinking then we're gonna get there. But so Demario Davis, Marshawn Lattimore, Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, all of these guys are from the old team, basically.
Mhm.
Like, they are the veterans, but they have been there. They're passing it on.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to just, restart, refuel.
Sell high a little bit on the
Hmm.
assets that you have, because I mean, obviously they have their first
Hmm.
and second, but building onto that going forward, I think would be kind of important for them. And obviously they're kind of in a weird range and at 14 where you're behind all the teams that are drafting quarterbacks. If you want to hypothetically find the guy of the future, but restructuring Derek Carr like you did for a few years, he doesn't have an opt-out until 2026.
Hmm.
So he's your guy. So
Yeah.
you're not going there. And of the guys that you're putting around him, it's getting worse.
Right.
So it's kind of a weird. I feel bad for Derek Carr because it seems like he's just kind of stayed in those kinds of situations for the
Hmm.
longest time, and then the few years he's had success have either been overlooked by other teams that have outplayed him at the end
Hmm.
or injury.
Injury. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to be optimistic about that situation, but I feel like this is one of the teams where I can kind of see that they're about to start selling off what they got and mortgaging to build towards the future. And basically, in 2 years, this is basically going to be a completely new coaching staff,
Yeah.
roster, all that stuff. And this is the start of it.
Well, I think that for just like, for me, I think about the draft a lot and what we're going to do, and
Mm-hmm.
we put an edge there in our draft. But one thing that we didn't really talk about was, I think that tackle might be the position that they go
Yeah.
instead, because Andrew, Pete's a free agent. Ramczyk is possibly gone for his career based on this
Mm-hmm.
injury. We don't know what's going to happen. He has a knee injury it's a cartilage injury. And then Trevor Penning, who they brought over,
He got benched mid-season
has
because
been
of
terrible.
being undisciplined and
Hmm.
starting fights
Yeah.
and yeah. So it's just kind of not really great.
Yeah, and that's part of the locker room thing you were talking about. I mean, bringing in guys that you already know have tempers, it's really hard to obviously get them to not have that.
Right.
And so sometimes teams won't. They'll just go to the next guy and just say, "This guy's got more talent, but we're not going to deal with that situation."
Mm-hmm.
But they did. They brought him in, and they basically have 3 first-round offensive tackles that aren't going to be serviceable on their roster.
Mm-hmm.
So we just we're gonna have to see what happens with their offensive line. I mean, it's definitely something that worries
Really
me.
the only building block at the very moment is Eric McCoy. He's been one of the best
Hmm.
centers since he's been drafted. But at the same time that he's already kind of been paid at a position that's kind of the least of value on the line.
Right.
Yeah, not a ton of building blocks and kind of aging veterans that, like I said, you kind of got to figure out selling high on while you can. The reason I didn't mention Marshawn Lattimore is because his post June 1st cut or trade isn't really opening up a lot of space. So
Hmm.
if you're going to be moving on from him, it's kind of got to be an offer that you can't refuse. But other than that, you can create the cap space with a couple of those guys parting
Right.
ways. But what are you going to get back for? And to me, it's just like move down,
Yeah.
trade picks, do what you can, like just bite the bullet. Like it makes no sense to just kind of stay in this area. And I'm not an advocate for just purely going 0-17, but at the same time, you still have to build your roster in a way that's going to compete for Super Bowls.
Hmm.
And they're far from that right now.
Yeah.
They're probably the furthest in the entire division in my eyes, just because of the lack of youth
Yeah. Of
on the
course.
team.
Hmm.
So, yeah, not a lot of building blocks, but who knows? Maybe they kind of prove us wrong, but I just don't like the vibes I'm getting in the atmosphere in New Orleans right now.
Well, I think what you were saying about Marshawn, I think he might be a perfect candidate to be traded pre-deadline.
Oh, yeah.
Because going to a cornerback needy team that is possibly a Super Bowl contender with just 1 or 2 more guys, he could fit that mold, I think. So it's kind of like Christian McCaffrey when he left Carolina, went to San Fran. They needed someone to be able to do that job, and he came in and he's been great, obviously, because he's Christian McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what the situation to get rid of Marshawn, not get rid of, but you know what I mean. Get him moved
Move
out
on,
of town.
sell high.
Yeah, age wise, so high. So maybe that's an option for them. But yeah, let's jump over to the division winning Tampa Bay Bucks.
Yeah, man, it was such a good story.
Yeah,
First year without Tom. Obviously they kind of in a sense similar to New Orleans, which they haven't really seen their cap hit start hitting yet, but they really kind of went all in for that team, and so this year they were really going to be a team that was supposed to take a step back, struggle, and they kind of just had such a good run towards the end of the year, and Baker Mayfield kind of becoming like a damn near out of the league because he got benched in Carolina, went to the Rams 3 days later, started on a Thursday night game, like those kinds of things, and then all of a sudden you're the guy that's supposed to succeed the GOAT, and he thrived.
Yeah.
He arguably, to me, had his best year of his career because in Cleveland, they did a great job building around him offensively, and he had a lot of stuff around him to just basically hand the ball off 35 times and great defense, everything. It just all worked. And Tampa Bay, it was kind of a guy, like you look at the finishing 23rd offensively, 23rd defensively.
Yep.
That's not a team that's like, oh, you got everything around you. Obviously, he's got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but both of them banged up, older, and offensive line is not what it used to be. It's really just Tristan Wirfs now, and a bunch of Jags, and obviously Rashad White, okay running back. Fantasy wise, if you're a PPR league, you love him, but just a guy,
true talent,
and yet he knocked off the NFC champs, and in dramatic fashion, like blowout, not even close from the jump, and then threw for 350 against Detroit, almost came back, but just had the late game interception in the final drive of the game, way above expectations. Like hard to give A-pluses in the NFL, but like in terms of what I expected from this team was not very much, and they very much exceeded it for me.
Well, yeah, I think I was actually going to preface it with how good Baker played. Like, I mean, you can't overlook it.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, they have Kate Otten is another guy that you can add in there, but really they don't have a number 3 receiver, or they have a rookie. They how do I put it? Like they funneled the ball to 2 guys. The only guys that really caught the ball, 2 guys. You knew where the ball was going, and they still caught it and they still scored. And so it was one of those things where you just look at maybe the nuance and the ability of those 2 guys is just better, or the quarterback also played well. And it's one of those fun teams that we weren't expecting, like you said. Of course, in any other division, they're not going to make the playoffs, but it's not any other division. They get the opportunity, they took it, and that's all that matters, And Mike Evans, 10th 1,000-yard season, and so
he's just kind of had an incredible run of just durability, being serviceable.
Yeah,
and he's one of the faces of the team for the last decade. He's kind of transitioned them from when they were just in their bad years of just consistently making the playoffs, and then I love seeing him from Texas and going to A&M and having the success that he had, and it's just been really cool to see for him. And then we've always loved Antoine Winfield Jr. He had a phenomenal year as a safety. He had 6 sacks, 7 takeaways, led both in both categories, 6 forced fumbles as a safety in this day and age is just incredible. He's just been the ultimate Swiss Army knife as a defensive player. And the problem is with Tampa Bay is just they have so many key free agents. And it's just hard to see them keeping everybody. They just released Shaq Barrett yesterday, to clear up cap space, which I told you pre-recording that I thought it was a little strange move because they had space to re-sign guys, and I didn't think that he was a guy that needed to be cut, but lo and behold, it did. And having your five best defensive players, your quarterback, and your best receiver in franchise history, and then you lose Ryan Jensen, obviously due to retirement and injury. That's a lot of key veteran leadership kind of guys that I can't see them keeping all of them.
Right.
Despite having the 10th most cap space at the very moment, you can't keep them all, and they're gonna have to make some tough decisions.
Yeah.
And not many of them are guys that you're just like, I'm gonna franchise. Antoine Winfield is probably the only one that I think makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
But I've not heard a lot of things that's likely to happen. So it's going to be very interesting. But I expect Baker Mayfield to be back. I think he's done enough to earn his spot as a starter for multiple years. But we'll see if it's a package deal with Mike Evans. But I really think that he might be a guy that somebody kind of pokes away or pries away, rather, by just giving his one last big deal.
Yeah.
Before he turns 31. So
that was going to be one of my questions. Was since he's about to he'll be 31 when season starts, I believe. So, he is getting to the threshold. 32 is really where you see big time regression. But what does a deal look like? Do you give him 2 years and you just want to see what he can do after he turns 32?
I think it'll be probably 2-year, 44-ish million. Not top of the line, top of the market that he would have gotten if he was 26, 27. Right. But I still think he has some productive years, and the way that he plays, I think he can age well. Because he's not necessarily just like he's physical, but he knows how to protect his body, and he's a good very underrated route runner for his size, jump ball guy. As long as he's healthy, he should still be productive in the next couple of years. So it just kind of depends on what his mindset is. Does he want to retire as a Buck, or does he want this one last run, or does he want just the most money he can get for his final deal? It'll be interesting. A similar guy that we had this past offseason when he got released was DeAndre Hopkins, and everybody and their mom wanted him, and what's he gonna get? And he just kind of settles for a medium deal with Tennessee, and it made no sense when he made that move, but he was still productive.
Yeah,
but he wasn't, on a winning team, and now he's kind of stuck there on a bad situation.
Yeah,
I hope for Mike's sake that he doesn't. But it'll be interesting to see, who takes a stab at him. There's a lot of, wide receiver needed teams that are contenders.
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody needs a Mike Evans.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about the number one team. Yeah. They have no wide receivers that can catch the ball. So you just look at Kansas City. Like, if he goes to Kansas City, what does that mean?
Yeah, schematically it makes no sense. But
no, but
he will be a 1,000-yard threat. Yeah. Great guy, highly productive, 10 touchdowns on a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of where he'll be, pending his health. And it just kind of depends on where he wants to go.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, Tampa Bay is definitely not a team that we see taking a step back as long as they can bring those guys back and, address the needs because they have the cap space, because they have so many free agents of important positions. Shaq Barrett walking, I don't know if that's the only one that will have to walk. They might have to get rid of one of their inside linebackers, Levante David or Devin White, which I think would probably give them the space to get everybody else.
True.
But
yeah, linebacker is kind of one of those spots that at this very moment, the way the market's been the last couple of years, that's the position group that's kind of gotten overpaid. And, I look at Chicago as an example where they, overspend on TJ Edwards.
Right.
And,
Tremaine.
Yeah, Tremaine. Yeah, there's two Edmonds. So.
Yeah, Tremaine Edmonds.
Trey. Yeah, so that's kind of one of those things where that's not a need. or a spot where you should be spending most of your capital.
Right.
But everybody needs a good linebacker. I think you look at the best teams towards the end of the year, and they all had good linebacking cores.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that struggled or were out of the playoffs early, via Dallas, Philly,
Yeah.
that was one of their biggest deficiencies, was that position. So you need somebody, but they got two big ones. I probably would side with bringing back Levante over
Mm-hmm.
Devin White, based on, I think Devin would be a candidate to be overpaid.
Yeah, consistency.
He's been very inconsistent.
Yeah.
PFF wise, love, hate PFF, whatever you want. I like it as a grading group to dissect. He has not been a PFF linebacker.
No.
He can create takeaways, he makes exciting plays, but he misses a lot of tackles.
Mm-hmm.
And, the play is just not what you would expect for a former top 5 pick.
Well, yeah, I think with him, it's like the things he can do, like making the sack in the Super Bowl,
mm-hmm.
those things that he can do is why you want him on your team. But for, you have to play 17 games.
Right.
And he's not going to help you in every one of those games. He's going to help you maybe in the big ones, maybe not so, but you know what I mean? Like he's going to help you in some of those games where he makes plays that you're like, wow, I didn't think he was going to be able to get there. But when he doesn't do well, it shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of a thing. So.
I kind of compare him, which is funny because they went to the same school on the same national championship team, but Patrick Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick Queen, former first-round pick that just kind of very inconsistent, doesn't really take the defense over the top. And they brought in another linebacker in Raquan
Mm-hmm.
Smith. And on the jump, he was able to just turn them into one of the top defenses once again that
mm-hmm.
they'd been missing for a few years. And all of a sudden, Patrick Queen's a free agent, and they're probably going to let him walk because they got the guy that they thought he would be.
Right.
Tampa Bay, they drafted Devin White thinking that he'd be that guy, but Levante David had just continuously been a top 5-6 linebacker, and Devin White really hasn't progressed to think that he would be that guy.
Right. It's kind of surprising too, because like you said, he's a top 5 guy, but he also is playing with Levante David.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you pick up some of those things? And just like, because I think, with Devin, I don't know if it's an IQ thing, like he's missing like some of the like football knowledge and like, or if it's just, he just goes too fast. He just doesn't know how to slow his body down. I mean, he runs a 4.
It's such an underrated skill because everybody wants to see how fast you can run in a straight line.
Exactly.
But a lot of linebacker is how to change direction, pursuit,
mm-hmm.
all that stuff. And I think that's just kind of, like you said, only going 1 speed. That's not really the specific position that you want.
Right. Yeah.
For that, there's that kind of trait.
Certain positions that fit that a little bit better. But yeah, if he just overruns a play and misses the tackle, like, it's great that you got there early.
Mm-hmm.
It is. But now you have to be able to get your feet under you and do things that, linebackers do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that might be something that, I don't know. I'm not going to tell an NFL player how to work on his footwork and stuff. I mean, that's not, I don't get paid enough for that, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But, I think that there are some things that we saw even when we were watching him come out of LSU, because he was definitely our number 1 linebacker on our board.
Right.
He was definitely top 10, top 15 pick to us. I mean, I always think top 10 linebackers are overrated because they do things like this first off, and second off, it's not the most important position on the field. So mm-hmm. you don't want to always go that high. It's like running back to me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we expect him to be a really good player. And I think he still has those traits.
Right.
But he needs to hurry up.
I don't think it's something like a Isaiah Simmons where all of a sudden he's going to be on his 3rd team in 3 years. And, usually first round picks, you find your way out of the league really quick doing that. I think he'll find another team. He'll be a starter for a few more years. But I think his time in Tampa is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And but we'll see with the other guys. I think bringing back the rest is probably ideal for Tampa. Don't know if that's what those free agents, because they're all unrestricted, want to do.
Right.
Because I think they are far away from contending, but because they are in the division that they're at, they've kind of overachieved a little bit. I think it just kind of depends on what they do. But Baker, everybody loves Baker. And I think bringing him back will be important because I think keeping him, while you might not keep the Levante Davids or the Mike Evans, I think he'll draw some talent, and that you won't have to go into a full blown rebuild that I anticipate that New Orleans will have to, because they don't really have anybody that's just like a player, a dude that I just want to play with. I don't care about the record of the team. I think Baker's a dude that he should be there for the next 4 or so years, ideally, and I think he'll keep them out of the dumps. So we'll see. I think it really comes down to this division, to Atlanta versus Tampa, and how they're kind of this way, and they're going to be mean in the middle, and it just kind of depends on who takes advantage of that. But both of them top 10 strength of schedule. 3 of the 4 easiest schedules are in this division. Probably going to have some higher win totals than the talent suggests, but it's an interesting division for sure.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, I mean, Tampa Bay and Atlanta, it'll really depend to me if Atlanta does a good job with quarterback, and play calling ends up being what we should expect. I feel like what we've wanted. And it's not just fantasy wise what we've wanted; it's life, because you put the best players you have on your team, the best situations, and they make plays. And we just haven't seen that in Atlanta. In Atlanta. So it will be fun to see who can top this division, and kind of, possibly, Atlanta's been good in the past. They've had really good teams with Matt Ryan. They went to the Super Bowl. They were up 28-3. And Tampa Bay, Tom Brady was here. Like, that was within 3 years ago. So we're gonna see these couple teams hopefully take the right steps. Hopefully we'll see a little bit of Carolina getting pulled on up with them. But yeah, New Orleans is gonna have a hard time kind of figuring it out. They're gonna have to rebuild a little bit. So we really appreciate y'all coming though, and watching us today, and taking your time to listen to our discussion. Hopefully y'all become part of our discussion and get down there in the comments and like and share and subscribe to our video, and follow all our socials, go to Discord, come have a conversation and discussion with us, because that's what this community is about.
Right. Yeah. And look at the time frame. We made it under an hour today. So
we're figuring it out.
We're figuring it out, getting a little better day by day. Getting clear, more concise, but just trying to stay informative, entertaining. But like he said, go to all our socials, look in the description below, follow us everywhere you can. Please engage with us. We want to start engaging, talking back and forth in the comments, in DMs, tweets, doesn't matter. We want to start engaging with you guys, start a community, because even though it's a long off season, I can't wait for the football season, because I'm going to be up at 6 a.m. talking with you guys. Emery likely doing the same where he can. It's exciting. We're building, a brand, of course, but community helps us build that, and getting y'all to be a part of it. And our website's going to be out hopefully sooner than later. Like, we are starting from the ground up, and now is the time to hop on and go through this with us, because then you can always say you were first, right? Oh yeah. Buy that stock while you can, baby.
Absolutely. So
to the moon.
We really appreciate y'all coming, and we will see y'all next time on our next video. So y'all have a good one.
Take care. Thank you.